Hey guys, alright? Welcome everyone. In the middle of the night, a woman named Rose rushes out of her house to search for her adopted daughter named Sharon. As she calls out her daughter's name, her husband Christopher tries to help her find the girl. Rose runs by the river, which leads to a dangerous cliff, on the other side of which she sees her daughter, who seems to be sleepwalking. In the girl's vision, the cliff appears different, all deteriorated, with a creepy girl at the end calling for her. The girl is about to jump off the cliff when Rose arrives at the last moment and manages to save her daughter. At the same time, the girl keeps repeating the word Silent Hill incessantly. It seems that Sharon has some supernatural condition. 2 years later, Rose and Sharon spend a moment together in nature. Rose then tells her daughter that they are going to travel to a place called Silent Hill, as the daughter keeps talking about it while sleepwalking. Sharon claims not to remember this, so Rose says they are going there so the girl can remember. Mother and daughter start their journey, and on the road, they pass by a sign with biblical words, "Do you not know that the saints will judge the world?" Meanwhile, Christopher tries to call them. He's annoyed because it seems he wasn't informed about the trip. He then checks the browsing history on Rose's computer and finds out that they are heading towards a long-abandoned town called Silent Hill. Christopher discovers that the town's population was wiped out 30 years ago due to a tragic fire. Rose and her daughter continue driving towards Silent Hill. At dusk, they stop at a gas station to refuel. Rose looks at her daughter sleeping in the car and takes her drawing notebook, which is now filled with creepy scribbles featuring images of a place in flames. Rose thinks her daughter made the drawing and shows the figure to her, but Sharon insists she didn't draw it, crying in fear at the sight. Her crying catches the attention of a police officer. When Rose goes to pay for the gas, the officer looks at Sharon inside the car. The girl then remembers the rule of never talking to strangers and closes the window in the officer's face, who says she is absolutely right. Meanwhile, Rose asks the cashier for directions to Silent Hill, but the girl replies that the way there no longer exists. The cashier then says Rose's card was declined, and she will have to pay in cash. She calls Christopher, informing her husband that he cannot stop her from going to Silent Hill. Christopher insists that their daughter needs medical help, but Rose believes that the medications will never work, so she is taking her daughter to Silent Hill to uncover the girl's strange condition. Rose believes that Sharon may have lived in Silent Hill before her adoption. She then hangs up the phone and notices the police officer looking at her car. After being questioned if everything was okay, she says yes and continues the journey with her daughter. The two of them are driving through the mountains when Rose notices that the gas station policewoman is following them, so she stops the car. At that moment, Rose sees a sign indicating that Silent Hill is nearby, turning to the left, and then she speeds away in the car to get rid of the policewoman. Rose drives the car fast enough and manages to pass through the gate. Suddenly, a creepy girl appears in the middle of the road. Rose swerves to avoid the girl and crashes the car on the side of the road. By dawn, Rose wakes up after the car accident and realizes that her daughter is no longer with her. The whole environment is covered in thick fog, and ashes fall from the sky. Rose exits the car and starts looking for her daughter. She sees a sign that says Silent Hill, showing that she has finally arrived in the town. While walking through the foggy streets of the ghost town, Rose sees a young girl who resembles her daughter. She follows her until they reach a long staircase leading to a basement. Rose starts hearing a loud siren in the midst of darkness, so she uses her lighter to explore the dark basement in search of her daughter. Inside, at one point, she sees a girl whom she thinks is her daughter and chases after her. However, she eventually comes across a mutilated man in protective gear hanging, which terrifies her. Rose immediately tries to flee, but several strange beings appear, slowly moving toward her, attempting to drag her. Rose runs away in fear, pursued by dozens of them. Then, things suddenly start disappearing, and Rose faints. After some time, she wakes up and roams the deserted streets again to find her daughter. Rose then encounters a disheveled-looking woman. The woman's name is Dahlia, and she tells Rose that she has also lost her daughter. When Rose shows a picture of Sharon, the woman tries to steal the photo, and Rose immediately leaves, returning to her car. There, she sees a drawing of a burning school. Shortly after, she leaves a voice message for her husband, informing him that their daughter has disappeared. Suddenly, the policewoman appears to arrest her, thinking she has done something bad to her daughter. Apparently, the policewoman managed to follow her and enter Silent Hill as well. Meanwhile, Christopher is driving towards Silent Hill to find his wife and daughter. He receives Rose's voice message on the way, but the message is completely distorted. When he arrives at the city gate, a police officer approaches him. It is revealed that this officer is also trying to find Rose. Back in the city, Rose and the policewoman try to leave, but the road is completely destroyed. As they attempt to find a way out, a monster suddenly appears. The monster spews hot ashes at the policewoman, burning her helmet. She then shoots the monster to death, and Rose takes the opportunity to try to escape. She heads towards the school from the drawing, hoping to find her daughter there. Upon entering the school, she slowly examines everything around her. Suddenly, she sees people in protective suits patrolling the area. Rose hides in another building, and as she walks through the classroom, she sees a young girl running and follows her. Shortly after, Rose arrives at the restroom and hears crying sounds in one of the stalls, thinking it's her daughter. She opens it, only to discover another mutilated body tied up with barbed wire. She then sees phrases on the walls telling her to take something from the body's mouth. She retrieves something from inside the body's mouth, and at that moment, the people in protective suits find her in the restroom. Rose locks the door, but they try to force it open. Fortunately, a bird sings, signaling something to them, and they immediately flee in fear to another place. Out of nowhere, a loud siren blares, and darkness descends again. The place where Rose is starts to decay, and the mutilated body begins to move. As the body touches the wall, the place begins to crumble. The bizarre creature slowly crawls toward Rose, who immediately flees. In the corridors, she sees giant cockroaches devouring the men in protective suits. Shortly after, she reaches a pit of fire. Crossing the path to the other side, she sees a girl named Alessa frantically scribbling on paper. As Alessa looks at Rose, she falls from the window. At that moment, a man with something resembling a pyramid on his head, carrying a large sword, walks toward Rose, who gets up and runs toward another building. Meanwhile, Christopher and the police officer arrive at Silent Hill School. They are in the same location as Rose, but they cannot see her, indicating that they are in different dimensions at that moment. Christopher can smell Rose's perfume and knows that his wife is there. This means they cannot see Rose because they are not in the same dimension. Back to Rose, she gets tired and stops running, and the cockroaches begin to approach her. Fortunately, the policewoman appears and drags her into a nearby room. They lock the door, and the policewoman removes Rose's handcuffs. But then, they hear something heavy approaching. Suddenly, a huge sword pierces the door and tries to hit them. It is revealed to be the monster with the pyramid on its head, which opens a large hole in the door and tries to enter the room to get them. Then, suddenly, it and the creepy creatures disappear, and the environment returns to normal, suggesting that all the terrible environment vanishes when morning comes. To continue the search for Sharon, they follow a clue from the object found by Rose earlier, leading them to a hotel. When they enter the hotel, they find a woman throwing rocks at Dahlia. The woman then says that there are other people in the city seeking refuge in the church. Suddenly, the policewoman sees a disturbing drawing in room number 111, and they decide to find that room. Meanwhile, Christopher is desperate to find Rose and his daughter and begins investigating what happened to them in Silent Hill. While checking some documents, he comes across a police case referring to Alessa as a fire victim. Back at the hotel, Rose, the woman, and the policewoman search for the room and see a mural on the wall depicting a witch being burned. They then discover that the people there are witch hunters and believe that burning witches can prevent the apocalypse. Rose suddenly realizes that room 111 is just behind the mural. Upon entering the room, they find everything completely burned. Meanwhile, the girl Alessa appears to Rose, who chases her until they reach a pit. There, Alessa begins to burn and then disappears mysteriously. Suddenly, the bird flies out of the pit, indicating that darkness is approaching. Rose, the policewoman, and the woman quickly head to the cult's church for shelter. The church is a safe place during the darkness because it does not change when night falls. When they arrive at the church, they encounter a crowd of cult fanatics gathering inside. Dahlia is also in the crowd and warns Rose and the policewoman not to be deceived by the cult, as the fanatics are already condemned for their sins. As everyone enters the church, the woman from the hotel returns to throw rocks at Dahlia. Suddenly, the executioner appears behind the woman and grabs her. Shortly after, he kills her in a terrible manner. Rose and the policewoman, horrified by this scene, enter the church, and the door closes. The cult fanatics curse Rose and the policewoman, believing them to be witches, so the policewoman fires her last bullet to silence them. The cult's leader enters, telling everyone that they need to pray. After the prayer, Rose desperately asks the cult leader to help her find her daughter. The leader reveals that Rose needs to face the demon to find the girl and warns her of the danger of confronting this creature, but Rose insists on facing it to save her daughter. They then go to the hospital along with the cult members wearing protective suits. The cult leader shows Rose the demon's location on the hospital map, and as she is about to enter the elevator, the leader realizes that she is Sharon's mother and orders the fanatics to grab Rose, as they believe Sharon is a witch. At that moment, the policewoman stops them and helps Rose descend using the elevator. She then manages to get to the basement, while the policewoman stays behind to face the fanatics. She has no more bullets in her gun, so the fanatics continue to beat her. Meanwhile, Rose enters the demon's room, where a voice tells her the truth behind Silent Hill. The voice says that the entire town believed Alessa was a witch, so they all hated her. It is then revealed that Dahlia is actually Alessa's mother and was expelled from the town. The cult leader convinced the woman that they needed to purify Alessa, and she eventually agreed. The cult took Alessa to the hotel room to burn her, and as the cult performed the ritual, the fire accidentally spread throughout the hotel, burning everything around. A police officer then found Alessa still alive, but she was in excruciating pain because her body was already burned. Alessa's mother regretted her decision upon seeing her daughter's horrific condition, and ever since, Alessa has sought revenge against the entire town, and the demon comes to help her take vengeance. Apparently, the young Alessa, who roams the town, is the demon using Alessa's appearance, while the real Alessa lies in a bed. At this moment, it is revealed that Sharon is the good side of Alessa, and to keep Sharon safe, the demonic Alessa took Sharon to the orphanage, where Rose and Christopher adopted her. Now, the demonic Alessa warns Rose that the cult leader plans to purify Sharon by burning her. The demonic Alessa then enters Rose's body so she can enter the church and prevent the cult from burning her daughter. Meanwhile, the cult members find Sharon in Dahlia's apartment. Apparently, the woman had been keeping her there all along, which is why the cult couldn't find her. Unfortunately, the cult leader discovered that Dahlia was hiding Sharon. Later, the cult prepares a large bonfire for the purification ritual and is about to burn Sharon and the policewoman. First, they put the policewoman in the fire, which slowly burns her, while the cult members celebrate and mock her at the same time. After the poor woman dies, burned alive, the cult prepares Sharon for the ritual, tying her to the stairs. Rose suddenly arrives, completely horrified by the scene. She enters the church, declaring that the cult members are already condemned for burning an innocent child. Rose then asserts with conviction that the cult leader is a sinner and is then stabbed in the chest by her. As her blood falls to the ground, the church begins to crumble, indicating that the demon has finally entered the church. A hole opens in place of the ritual, and the real Alessa, surrounded by barbed wire, rises slowly, frightening the cult members. The real Alessa then grabs the cult leader using the barbed wire while also attacking the cult members. The barbed wire pierces the cult leader's body and tears her in half. Meanwhile, the demonic Alessa is dancing on the ground as she looks at the leader's body. Rose stabs one of the cult members, and another member tries to attack her, but she is protected by the barbed wire, which kills the cult member instantly. The barbed wire eliminates the cult members one by one until no one survives, while Dahlia walks through the blood-soaked floor. Rose tries to close her daughter's eyes to shield her from so much violence, but Sharon opens her eyes and witnesses it all. The girl then sees the demonic Alessa looking at her. The next day, Rose and Sharon wake up. It seems like everything is over, but apparently, the demon has possessed Sharon because the girl is acting strangely. Shortly after, they leave the church, leaving Dahlia desolate. Rose drives back home, and when they arrive, everything still seems foggy, and they are still completely alone. In the end, Rose and Sharon appear to be trapped in the alternate dimension, while Christopher waits for them in the real dimension.